Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today we're going to explore a centuries-old tomb located deep in a haunted jungle, the jungle tomb of the Mummy Bride, a fantasy adventure with versions available for both Dungeons & Dragons and one of my favorite old-school RPGs, Dungeon Crawl Classics. In this action-packed, pulpy adventure, the PCs have to explore a pyramid filled with traps, black magic, and the remnants of evil gods and their old servants. And if they survive all of that, well, they're going to come face to face with the Mummy Bride herself, a cursed priestess who will not take lightly the PC's intrusion into her sacred temple. Intrigued? Well, if you're interested in learning more, then sharpen your machete, grab your torches, and definitely bring the bug spray, because not only are you going to get a full review of Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride, but I'll give you GMs some tips and tricks on how to run this adventure like a pro. Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride is written by Levi Combs and Jeff Skyfert. There are versions of this adventure available for D&D 5th edition, in which case it recommends 5th level characters, and Dungeon Crawl Classics, which recommends 3rd level characters. Now, for full transparency, I ran the Dungeon Crawl Classics version, because I like my pulp grindhouse adventures to be dangerous for careless players. I can't really comment on the differences between the two versions, but I'm willing to bet they play mostly the same, probably with the 5e version being a little bit more survivable than Dungeon Crawl Classics, which enjoys killing its players much the same way I enjoy prosciutto and cheese. Mummies and feta. The adventure clocks in at about 142 pages, but the main adventure only takes up about 30 of those pages. The rest of this book is filled with side quests, smaller tombs, and tons of bonus material so that you can turn this into a full-fledged jungle campaign. Now, there's a lot packed into that book, but I'm only reviewing the main adventure today, which challenges the PCs to explore the central pyramid of Mazalitzli, the evil Mummy Bride herself. For you old-school players, Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride is heavily inspired by older dungeon crawls, especially the Hidden Shrine of Tomawa-chan, an old D&D module which just did such a marvelous job of immersing D&D players into a dungeon inspired by a pastiche of Mayan and Aztec tropes. The Hidden Shrine of Tomawa-chan is one of my favorite old school adventures because it's really detailed and well thought out, and it just does such a great job presenting the players with traps and puzzles that require your players to think their way through the dungeon rather than just hack their way through it. So if you like Hidden Shrine of Tomawa-chan, I'll just tell you right now, you're going to like this adventure. There's 3 levels to Mazalitzli's pyramid that the players are going to explore, about 30 rooms altogether. It's hard for me to say exactly how long this adventure is going to take your PCs, because it really depends on whether they like to explore every nook and cranny of a dungeon like this, or they're just going to beeline right to the top of the pyramid and go for the Mummy Bride herself. In my experience, my players are able to get through most of the adventure in 2 or 3 sessions. Because this adventure is fairly open-ended, I won't do my normal style of review, where I describe the story and the events and then say what I think. Instead, I'm going to walk through each level of the Mummy Bride's pyramid and use my system of ups and downs to highlight what I think works and what I think doesn't work with the adventure. Okay, here we go. Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride includes several different ways to hook the players. There's a traditional treasure hunt with the PCs deep in the jungle called the Green Hell in search of a heart of gold hidden somewhere in this pyramid. Or there's another setup where the PCs are hired by a powerful noble to chart the jungle. Or if you're just playing this as a one-shot, the PCs are fleeing a horde of evil cannibals and the temple is the only refuge from them. I kind of like this last setup because it means the PCs just can't leave the temple whenever they want and rest up. But the fact that this adventure gives GMs a bunch of different ways to set it up, along with a big table of rumors to intrigue the players, well, that gets an up. Because this adventure is inspired by Aztec and Mayan tropes, it describes many evil gods that will inspire parts of the temple. I like that the authors fleshed out the background here with these gods, but I wish it did a better job of helping the GM understand how to give this background to the players. There's like 20 evil gods referenced up front in the adventure, and they all have very authentic sounding names like Takazacatl, the Dread Orchid, and Chualazazaltz, the Great Bat. I'm sure I mangled those. It's just a lot for GMs and players to absorb. I ended up making a cheat sheet for my cleric player, but then realized as I was playing that none of it really matters to the adventure. It's all just flavor, and you don't really have to think about any of that too much. This is not enough to get it down, but at the end of the video, I'm going to show you how I consolidated the backstory and the rumors and just all the hints here to give my players more context up front. Okay, so the PCs are all trapped in this cursed pyramid, and they'll have to make their way up to its top to deal with the mummy bride herself. Now, as you'd expect, level 1 of the pyramid is the largest level. The main antagonists on this level is a band of gibbering ghouls. As soon as the players enter the pyramid, they're going to hear the chaotic gibbering of these monsters in the distance, echoing off the walls. The ghouls' lair is actually located very early on in the pyramid, but I moved the ghoul pack back into the depths of the pyramid a little bit more, just so that I could haunt my players with that incessant gibbering and waiting a little while and adding tension until the ghouls would ambush them in a good spot. This really helped up the horror level of this pyramid by pushing those ghouls back and giving the players the feel that they were being stalked by the hungry undead the moment they entered this temple. One thing I didn't like, by the way, is that the adventure gives stats for the new monsters that it includes, but for the monsters covered in the main book, like the ghouls, it just points the players back to the core rules. And I really don't like this because then you have to flip back and forth between books as a GM, and so this gets it down for making my GM life a little bit harder. One of my favorite rooms on this first level of the pyramid contains a mummified head in a bag. This guy's name is Umjubu the Old, and his mouth was sewn shut years ago to prevent him from speaking eldritch secrets. So he kind of just mumbles through stitches. This artifact is so evocative, so Umjubu gets a big up from me, especially since what he mumbles is useful later on in the adventure, protecting the PCs from certain dangers in certain rooms. But the problem here is that, well, my players would never ever unsew his mouth to hear what he's saying, which honestly I totally get. In a pyramid filled with curses and traps, why would you ever do that to yourself? Unsealing this guy's head just seems like he's just going to curse you with 1,000 horrible things. So I made a couple quick changes here. First, I made sure that the players heard Mjubu's mumbling from a nearby room, just so they were more likely to find him. They hear mumbling, maybe think that somebody was still alive in the pyramid, and then be horrified to find this bag with a mummified head in it. It was great. Second, I gave the PCs a chance to listen closely to his mumbling to kind of make out the phrase that he's saying without unsewing his lips. If you made a good perception check, you could decipher about half of what he was saying and know enough to know that it's some kind of prayer to the gods. And this gave the PCs enough information to figure out what was going on and how he might be helpful without requiring them to do something stupid like unsewing the mouth of a cursed mummy head. So I'd suggest you make those couple changes just to make sure this plays out really well. There's also another fun room where there's this giant statue of a frog god with his mouth all full of fangs wide open, and it requires a player to stick his arm in the mouth, draining that character's blood to fill up its gem-like eyes, which then unlocks a secret door to the south. There's something about requiring players to stick their arms into orifices that just feels old school. I mean, it's never a good outcome, but it's really fun. So a giant frog mouth gets another up from me.
Hey guys, look at this amazing frog statue. Feels like I should just stick my hand right in, doesn't it?
The secret room that is unlocked by the frog god contains 2 angry undead priests in it. One of the few rooms in this pyramid which actually gives the PCs a chance to talk to the bad guys. I wish the adventure gave a little bit more time here to flesh these guys out, to fill the PCs in a little bit more of the history of the pyramid. So I expanded this section a bit and had them tell the PCs about Umjubu, the guy in the head, and how he betrayed the mummy bride, and again, making the PCs more likely to listen to him. I also had these priests describe how the mummy bride's serpent servant would strangle them all eventually, which gives the players a little hint about what to expect at the top of the pyramid, but more on that later. I will say though, especially in light that this priest's room is supposed to be a treasure room, that unfortunately, much like the adventure that this was inspired from, the treasure in this pyramid is pretty stingy. One of these priests carries a cannibal jar, which can unleash the spirits of the dead on enemies, but it can only be used once a day, which means the PCs may never get a chance to use it because the cannibal priests use it right away. So I tweaked this magic item a little bit to say that you could use it twice a day, but the second use was half as effective. I mean, sticking your arm in a frog mouth and fighting 2 undead cannibal priests should yield more than 100 gold in treasure and a couple healing potions, right? But the fact that this adventure seems to either contain worthless crap that's worth only a few gold pieces, or a couple really powerful artifacts, just gets it down from me, because it just needed stuff in a middle tier. I think stuff that necessarily wasn't magical but was effective, like maybe obsidian spears that did bonus damage but easily shattered, or feathered shields that could replace the ones that the PCs will surely lose along the way. It just needed more stuff in the middle to kind of tempt the players through this pyramid. Eventually, the players will find their way up to level 2, where they'll be thrust into this like cursed and dark miasma. The PCs will need to speak a blessing here to get through safely, but this blessing is written on the outside of the temple and it sure doesn't sound like a blessing, so I've never had a group figure that out, and some of them always end up getting cursed for like a full day afterwards. This like puzzle gets a down from me because it's kind of obtuse. But you can fix this in the introduction of the adventure by reminding that cleric PCs might know that this culture of the temple relied on a lot of verbal blessings to appease their gods. Again, I'll cover how I set all this up to my players better at the end of this video. Much like the first level, there are more fun dungeon rooms on the second level of this pyramid. There's a hive filled with warmonger wasps. They're so big that the cannibals who live in this area used to ride them into battle. Like wasp riding cannibals, that just gets an up from me, even though you don't really see that in this part of the adventure. It's all mostly included in like the expanded stuff, like the lost levels and the other temples, but it's still cool. And there's also emaciated zombies on this level who are like covered in ticks who can suck the stamina out of heroes. All really cool stuff. There's also a really cool map room that shows all of the other hidden temples in the jungle, setting up a larger campaign. I love it when adventurers give the players hooks into other adventures. That really puts the decision on whether to turn a one-shot into a larger campaign into the hands of the players, which just takes a lot of pressure off of GMs. And there's so much more in this book beyond this main scenario. Like there's like cannibal villages and lost levels and more tombs and 2-headed T-Rexes and 4-armed zombie gorillas. Like wow, GMs who are looking for an action-packed pulp campaign will find months and months of great material to expand on, and it's all set up here by this one room. So the existence of this map room luring the players in these locations, that just gets a big up for me. My favorite room, though, on the second level is one that has this massive mural painted on its walls. It's a horrible, decadent scene with like 6 skinless, long-haired women attending an empty throne. And above the mural is written, "The 6 skinless wives of the lustful one." And of course, if a PC messes with the mural, which they will, obviously somebody will do that. They can get pulled into the mural where they'll spend an eternity writhing in horror at the foot of that throne.
Hey guys, look at the pretty ladies in this painting. Feels like I just got to touch one, doesn't it?
Ah, what a great fun way to kill off a PC. This definitely gets an up, and a special award for the old school kill of the month. Well done, Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride. Well done indeed. The final level of the pyramid only contains 2 rooms. The first is this massive chamber that contains a giant sun door, which guards the tomb of the Mummy Bride herself. There's a special gem that the players need to find to unlock this door, which can be found earlier in the temple, but again the adventure does right by players and gives heroes an option for forcing the door open in the event they couldn't find that gem or don't want to bother going back and looking for it. The adventure does such a great job of giving groups different options for getting through its obstacles, so that's another up. The finale of the adventure takes place in the grand tomb of Mazatlitzi, the Mummy Bride. Her corpse is guarded by dyed pygmy mummies, their mouths sewn shut and bearing obsidian swords. I love how this adventure just makes everything so evocative. I mean, of course a mummy's tomb is going to be guarded by lesser mummies or undead servants, but the fact that the authors take the time to describe them as small pygmies who are dyed different colors depending on their station in life is just so wonderfully vibrant and creepy. Now, as soon as the PCs enter the Mummy Bride's chamber, she bursts through her sarcophagus and just immediately goes on the offensive. I didn't love her introduction here. It felt like if she was watching the players the whole time, then she would have just gotten up sooner and just gone downstairs to kill them. Or why is she waiting undead in her tomb to suddenly burst out? I think the GM has to just, time this a little better, give the players a few moments to explore that tomb and maybe see a treasure embedded in her sarcophagus, and as they get close, then she wakes up to protect herself. I don't know, you just have to work on the timing of that introduction to make it extra dramatic. Now, Mazatlitzi, the Mummy Bride, is going to be a handful for the PCs. Each time I've run this adventure, she's killed most of the party. She can easily deal 10 points of damage each round, which for a 3rd level Dungeon Crawl Classics player could be deadly. She's got a lot of spells and undead immunity. She can strangle opponents for increasing damage, and she can cause the pyramid to literally swallow foes whole. Oh, and she's resistant to fire, so that's gonna definitely surprise your players.
Hey Mummy Bride, looks like I brought a torch for you. What do you think of that?
And she has a magical staff, the Staff of the Slithering God, which can transform itself into this giant slithering terror, a big black boa constrictor. So between the Mummy Queen, the pygmy mummies, and this giant snake, this final battle is going to be chaos for your players. The PCs are going to need to come prepared and with smart tactics. They have to protect their spellcasters, focus fire on the Mummy Bride, and hope for the best. It's an epic old school boss fight that's not going to be won just through sheer brute force and attack rolls. So this big finale gets an up. Besides the slithering staff itself, the main treasure here is the Mummy Queen's heart, a fist-sized red jade gemstone that's worth almost 1,000 gold pieces. But it is cursed and it will bring ruin to those who keep it, which in Dungeon Crawl Classics means you can't regain your luck until you receive divine aid. And while a cursed treasure is appropriate for this sort of mummy adventure, I gave the PCs a chance to sell it off before too much damage was done. Call me a softie, but after a brutal almost TPK every time, I just wanted the PCs to feel good about exploring the rest of the jungle. So that's the end of Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride. As you can see, I kind of like this adventure. The adventure does exactly what it promises to do. It's pulpy, it's visceral, and it's filled with all the flavor that you'd expect from a jungle pyramid. It's also really flexible and engages players with opportunities for stealth and guile and puzzle solving and just all-out combat aggression at times. It's a great example of how game design has improved since those old days of the hidden shrine. My only real issue with this adventure is that it just doesn't do a great job of setting everything up and giving the players the rules of the world up front. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of gods and some puzzles that really rely on players doing some very unintuitive things, like unsewing the mouth of a cursed mummy head. To address some of this, I created what I call banter cards for my players, which contains some more context for them up front. Here's how this works. At the beginning of the game, I hand each player a card with 4 or 5 bullet points on it. They contain a mixture of backstory, rumors from the book's rumor table, and some other hints on some of the things that they're going to find in the temple. Then, as soon as the game begins, each player just picks one of those and reads or paraphrases it in a way their character might say something. And then they go around the table just jumping in here and there and inserting lines of dialogue where it feels appropriate. This is just a wonderful role-playing scene for everyone. It not only sets the stage up better for the adventure, but it's extremely entertaining for the group. It puts all the work of setting this adventure up into the hands of the players, which is way more fun versus a GM just reading a lot of flavor text up front. You can download my banter cards in the description below and give it a go and let me know how it works for you. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more reviews like it, please remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Also, if you've run or played in Jungle Tomb of the Mummy Bride, then let me know in the comments below how it went. I'd love to know how your group fared in this tough, demanding, dangerous pyramid. Until next time, I'm JC, and just remember, if you find yourself in a cursed jungle pyramid staring at the creepy statue of a frog god, just stick your arm right in. It's always going to be entertaining for your friends.